Sure that we're going. All right, good evening, everyone. Another edition of the Chess Cave Live, and we are here with my usual co-host Omar Mills. Hi, Omar.
Hello, sir.
And a very special guest tonight, everyone. This is
Yes,
Grandmaster Susan Polgar has been very generous to come on. Susan, welcome.
welcome. Thank
Hi,
you so
thank you.
much.
Pleasure to join you guys.
And
Likewise.
for anybody that maybe doesn't know somehow, Susan is a legend in the chess world, grandmaster, former women's world champion, Olympiad gold medalist, and I don't know how many medals you won, but many medals. you know,
Five of them girl.
yeah, incredible. Prolific author and content creator herself, and also a founder of the Susan Polgar Foundation, running programs most like focusing on children in the United States. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. We could go on for a long time, but anyway, Susan, again, we're delighted to have you. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, humbled.
My pleasure.
Um, and yeah, so let me just see how we're. Give me one sec. And welcome to everybody in the chat.
Hey, welcome.
If
Hey,
you're here
RGB.
and you have questions for Susan, we're gonna be we're gonna be tossing them your way, Susan. I'm sure there's gonna be lots of questions. People want to
Sounds
hear about
good.
uh, you. So
Yeah,
welcome
she's in the
everybody.
chat. Everybody's saying like, "Hey, chess royalty in the house. Welcome." Yeah, they're excited.
Yeah. Um, so I'll just start and just say that Susan, like when I was starting to learn chess a long time ago, one of my first chess books was searching for. No, Bobby Fischer teaches chess, right? I'm sure you know it. And my second chess book was Chess: The 5,000 Puzzles, with the Polgar book with the endless tactics. Um, that was one of my starts. So never would I have ever imagined that. One day here we are. So
Yeah, that book, the big book, as we call it.
yes,
Sometimes we joke around that it can, it has dual purpose. You can learn chess, or you can uh, lift some weights, with it because it's so heavy.
that's right. Yeah.
But that's a book that's published under my father's name. But in reality, I probably worked a lot more on it than he did, collecting most of the examples as I was teaching my sisters in those days. They were starting out in chess, and I collected them. I created a bunch of them by making modifications from games or other puzzles that may have had multiple solutions. I wanted to make sure there is only one solution. So obviously that book
Right.
has a lot of special memories for me.
Yeah, and in those days, like I don't think you could really like just download a whole database of puzzles. Like you had to make those by hand, pretty much. I assume, right?
Exactly, it was very different. I remember those cards like index cards, large size index cards, kind of things that we
Index
were
cards,
doing
yeah.
the
Oh,
diagrams
jeez.
on. Yeah, the good old days,
Yeah.
pre-technology.
um, yeah. So our audience is mostly adult improvers on Twitter, who I know you've interacted with quite a bit, and so I'm sure they'll have lots of questions for you, and some of the questions I've that were submitted, I have some notes here, so we'll ask you kind of as the night goes on, I suppose. Um,
Sure.
and well, I guess we could start with kind of a random one, if you like, in the chat from Lower Rated. He says thoughts on the effectiveness of puzzle compositions. Um, like, I think I kind of know what he's getting at. Like, some of them are pretty realistic, but others are like you get this position with like almost like scattered pieces and you have to figure out the solution and like some or it's like some like really in-depth thing that's miles deep. Like what do you think about the usefulness of those for chess training?
So there are two kinds of puzzles, and it's a perfect question in the sense since you were just talking about the big book, right? And I would say about 75% or so of the book are very practical and useful. And the other 25% are those pieces scattered around kind of positions. And in many of them, white has like 6 pieces versus black having just a king. So that's a whole different art. And on how to checkmate in 2 moves or 3 moves, like the quickest way, versus the practical type of positions when that you may see in one of your future games. Those are definitely very, very useful and practical. So you have to really differentiate those two types of puzzles and problems. And there are the practical ones, which I very strongly recommend. To do the more the better. The more it becomes a routine and pattern recognition, and the faster you can solve them, the better chess player you'll be. While the other one is more for fun. It's I almost would say it's a variant. It's nothing to do really with practical chess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so I guess should we take a look at your game then that I have for us loaded up?
Yeah,
We'll
sure.
start with
So
that.
I understand you have it kind of preloaded.
I have
So
it.
I'll
Yeah, let me pull it up
kind
here.
of guide you on what speed to look at the moves. So
Yes,
let's go
please.
through the first opening moves. It's a Benoni. I played d4 and knight f6, c4, c5, d5, e6. So this is the so-called Benoni, which is kind of a funny thing in itself. Most people don't know what that means, but apparently it comes from the Hebrew word or expression. It's the son of sorrow, or something like that, if you translate it to English, which I didn't know for until my teenage years. Kind of
Actually,
interesting.
maybe can you tell us a little bit about like where this game occurred and how old you were and like what was
Yeah,
what was going on
absolutely.
in
So
the
this was sure. So this game was played in 1985. So I was, I think, about to turn 16. And my opponent was a very well-known theoretician at the time. He was known to analyze very deeply his openings, and the openings he played, he was an expert at. And this was a really interesting game in the sense that it was as one of those team championship games, league games that doesn't really exist so much in the US, as it's a very European thing. In Hungary in those days, along with Germany and Spain and other countries. It's a huge thing. There are many teams, and the way it works in Europe and in Hungary specifically as well, that we would have teams, and the teams, it's a whole sports club. So we would have a soccer team, we would have a basketball team, a swimming team, and a chess team. And
naturally, yeah.
yeah, and so basically it was very popular, and our chess team had I think 5 levels. So when I was a 4-year-old or 5 years old, rather probably, I started out in my club on the fifth team, and each team would have 12 to 14 players that would play in each league match, plus subs. So there would be maybe 20 or 30 people on the list, because some people couldn't make it on certain days, but at least the 12, let's say, had to play. So this particular game was played in one of these league games that we would be playing every 2 weeks on the weekends, on Sundays typically. And so basically there were 2 seasons. There was the fall season when the league started around September, went all the way through the spring, and it stopped, I think, around May. So from September through May or so, kind of every 2 weeks, we would play the other teams based on the division. So this game was played in the first division, of course, already. But as I said earlier, I started out in the fifth division when I was 5 years old, and worked my way up from team 5 to 4, 3, 2, and finally made it to D team of our sports club. So I was playing this game, and as I said, Hardichai, who is my opponent, is an international master from Hungary. He was playing a game a few months earlier in this very opening. So let's proceed with the next few moves. Knight c3, took on d5, took back, d6. I developed my other knight, and he played g6 to fianchetto his bishop. So this is kind of one of the main starting positions of the Benoni, where white can play in many different ways. White can also try to fianchetto the light squared bishop by playing g3. White can play, as I played, with bishop f4. The main line, so-called, is actually playing e4 immediately,
Right.
fighting for the center, which in this game I did not do. So came the bishop f4. And this was kind of my specialty. I had many, many games with this bishop f4 prior as well as after this game. And a6 is one of the moves here. Bishop g7 is another, instead, immediately to follow up the fianchettoing of the bishop. And here I played e4, so this was still preparation. And he played bishop g7. So this is a very interesting moment, where instead of just continuing developing and castling, which is kind of the normal thing to do, I played a bit more aggressively, and I played queen a4 check. And as so often, when we make an exception from a rule, it's because we have some concrete justification for it. So in this particular case, it is that if black would play the natural pawn blocking the check with b5, I would use the pin that the queen created along the a file, and I could take with my bishop that pawn on d5 with a check, winning a pawn. So that's the first tactic that justifies the exception from the rule as of continuing to developing, and moreover, bringing the queen out early, which is normally not something we like to do. So another one is, if black would normally just develop his knight to b to d7, blocking the check again, that would again fail because the pawn on d6 is hanging. So because of these tactical motives, I decided to give the check. And of course, my opponent was well prepared, because he played, as I said, several games the same way earlier, shortly before our game. In fact, one of them he annotated for the chess informant. And I know today for
Wow.
the newest generation, it's not a big thing, but in those days, that was the chess Bible.
That's right.
It
Yeah.
was the chess database before the chess database, chess base ever existed.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was a huge thing. And so bishop d7 he played, and then I played queen back to b3. And now attacking the pawns, both of them. My queen attacks the pawn on b7. Now I'm seeing the board very tiny. I don't know about you guys.
Oh,
I'm seeing, now it's good. Okay, so not only the b7 pawn, but also the d6 pawn by the bishop is being attacked. So it's a dual attack. And this is actually, objectively speaking, and after checking with the engines and today's theory, I would say black's best bet is to retreat the bishop to c8 in this position, which is not a happy thing to do in general. Then you just move the bishop out to undevelop it back to c8. But my opponent had a different plan, because he succeeded with it in his previous games. He played bishop g4, and that's really a gambit, right? Sacrificing, first of all, the pawn on b7, which I happily accepted. I took the pawn, and he had further sacrifice in mind and played bishop takes f3.
Now, were you aware of this line? Like, did you prepare this ahead of
Yes.
time? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, because this was still his game, actually
Gotcha.
annotation to his game.
All right.
And here, his annotation continued that if he assumed that queen takes rook is good for black after knight takes e4, which happened actually in our game. And he also commented, if you take back the queen a8, that if I take the bishop on the other hand, which he thought was the better option, then he will play knight to h5, attacking my bishop. And if now I take the rook in the corner, then he'll take my bishop with that sacrificing an exchange in addition to the pawn that I already won. However, his dominance of the dark squares, including the knight and his bishop, beautiful bishop, and then after castling, bringing the queen out to a5 or b6, indeed, black would have an excellent compensation for the sacrifice material, most importantly because the white king will never find safety anywhere, not even in the dreams, because even if I get to castle in either direction, the king is not safe because the G file is open, the B file is open, and that's the reason why black just has an amazing compensation.
See this, Omar? We
So
talk
let's
about
go
this a
back.
lot in our lessons when we talk about piece activity. Like these two pieces are just totally
Exactly,
dominant.
and
Yeah.
that's a hard thing really to easily explain that we teach our students, right, that each piece has a material value, right? The queen is 9, the rook is 5, and so on. And then there are all these kind of abstract exceptions when, because the positioning of the pieces are superior, it more than compensates for material. And unfortunately, there is no easy way to learn this or understand this. It comes with experience, it comes with learning, it comes with losing some games when the opponent sacrifices and it turns out that the attack is more dangerous than what the material is worth. So there is no shortcut there, but you just have to learn through experience. But understand that concept as the first step, obviously, that material is not everything. So that's already actually a good sign. If you get to that stage that you get to play people who understand that material is not everything, it means you're through the beginner phase. So let's move on. I took the rook on a8 and came knight e4. So this was actually the critical moment because Hardichay only focused on the forceful moves here, which is the first one to focus on. For example, if I would take the bishop on f3, that's kind of hangs. Then knight would take on c3. And if I take the knight, then the bishop captures the pawn, check, forking the rook and the king. And black is very happy, winning back the material with interest. After I block the check, remove the king, bishop takes rook, and black is up the pawn with a great attack on top of everything else, because black will be able to castle on the upcoming move, while the white king is, even if it castles, still not in real safety. So let's put back the moves to the game. That was exactly the position. The other move that my opponent have anticipated, obviously, is me taking the knight, when I think he wanted to just take back with the bishop. And all of a sudden, the pawn on b2 is targeted by the dark square black bishop. And my other problem is that my f1 bishop cannot easily develop because it's busy guarding on g2. And also the black queen at times threatens to come out to a5 with a check, and especially after black castles and the black rook appears on the e file, it can also be very devastating to the white king. So I did not take not the knight, not the bishop, but played this move rook c1, simply protecting my knight. And here, all of a sudden, this was the big cold shower for my opponent, this rook c1 that he didn't analyze, and I did. And I understood that if black takes knight c3, I'll just take back, and my material advantage will be significant, because now the difference is that if I manage to develop my bishop from f1 and castle without ruining my pawn structure on the king's side, like in earlier variations we've seen, not opening up the g file, then the material advantage, of course, will prevail, given that my king gets to safety. And here we made a move actually that I did not analyze, so I was out of my preparation after the next move. He played bishop d4. And he is threatening to checkmate me literally in one move by playing bishop to f2.
Yeah, when I first saw this game, I was like, man, how how many moves is this bishop going to sit on f3 without being captured? It was pretty funny, just sitting there, not afraid.
So as I learned years later, when the engines became strong enough to teach us humans, actually taking the bishop is also okay in this position. But obviously, I didn't have any engines during the game, or even in that era, engines were not very good at all. So I played rook c2, protecting simply the threat on f2. And the problem is now that if black moves the bishop that's being under attack on f3, then the knight on e4 is unprotected. So therefore, out of desperation, he took on f2, bishop takes f2.
I think it was knight takes.
Yeah, not the knight. I think he took with the bishop first.
Oh, well, in any case, I think it transposes, but that's the only move I have.
Yeah, maybe he took with the knight. Anyway, he took, king f2, and he moved his bishop back to g4. And actually, this is the fun part of the game. So this is why this is one of my favorite games. Everything I said so far is unimportant compared to what's coming.
This is where everything gets spicy. Omar, you must have had fun looking at this.
Yeah. So this is one of those rare things that I think all chess players dream about, to have an opportunity to play in the 19th century Morphy style.
I was going to say, it reminds me of Morphy's games.
Exactly. It's a lot of fun, and unfortunately, our opponents, as we get to play tougher opposition, rarely give such opportunities nowadays. So the first thing is, I was applying a principle that time is more important than material.
Thank you, Sean.
And came the first of the many sacrifices, bishop to b5, check. So the purpose of this move is to get my rook into the game without wasting time, without allowing black to castle and put his king to safety. So he accepted the sacrifice, he took my bishop, and the rook came, check. So now the king can go in two directions. He went towards the rook, but let's see quickly what would happen if the king would have moved to d7. Then I would have checked with my queen on b7 check, only move to black, and
maybe we can give chat a chance to find this move. This would be an easy one compared to what happens later. Okay, chat, who can find the move here for white that wins? Winning move. Did you look at this, Omar, at all when you were looking at the game?
No, I was just fascinated. Again, I got caught up in the fact that, and I don't want to give a spoiler, but the fact that Susan had 3 brilliants in a single game. That's I was like, I've never seen, and mind you, I'm even caught up now as she talks through the game, seeing 100 things that I didn't see, because I've got, Susan, I was telling you, I analyzed this with what Ian just taught me last week about analyzing my games. And the entire time I'm like, why wouldn't you just take the, why wouldn't you just take the bishop? Why's the bishop, and looking at things where, oh, he must have blundered because he just let that pawn hang and so forth. And and as hearing you talk through it, it was intentional. And that's kind of blowing my mind right now that, wait a minute, he meant to do that the entire time. So that's fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating.
All right, we have a couple of answers in the chat, Susan. So you wanna tell them what the move is?
Yeah. So the key move here is a rook sacrifice, giving the rook up on e7 to deflect the king from protecting the queen. And when king takes, then I take the queen. Okay, so let's go back. My opponent's king went in the other direction because he saw that that wouldn't work. And now another forceful move, bishop h6, check. And king had to go next to the rook. So now this is a very bad visual for black, and the poor rook in the corner is stuck because the king is not letting it out, and my bishop, very importantly, doesn't let the king move. So those are kind of stuck for a while. But in the meantime, black is also threatening something, namely moving the queen out to h4. And that would be a check and a fork attacking my bishop. And here I made a very nice move, another aesthetically pleasing move, and sacrifice, moving my rook to e7. It's a quiet move that doesn't allow the black queen to come out to h4 to check me. And the point is that black has a back rank problem, so if they would take the rook, then I would take the knight, and it's basically a back rank checkmate, because after black blocks the check a couple different ways, eventually it will be checkmate. So he saw that, of course, and after rook e7, also I think he was afraid that eventually I may get my rook to b7 and use the pin that's happening over the night. So he moved back his bishop to d7, on one hand to prevent my rook to getting from d7 attacking his knight, but more importantly, now the rook is being attacked, because if it would be black to move again, black would take the rook, and after queen b8, he can just block my check with the bishop or the queen, and at least he still maintains his material advantage without getting mated. But after the bishop d7 came one of my all-time favorite moves.
Let's see if somebody can find it. This is the all-time favorite Susan Polgar move. Who can find
savagery,
it?
Man. Savage. I was so hyped when I saw it. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. All right, chat. You got another chance. You did well on the last one, but this one's harder. All right, good move for white here. Winning move. Well, I have to ask you, Susan. I only looked at this quickly, but I thought there might be two different winning moves here.
That's true. That's the sad part, that actually the second solution as well. But I went for the prettier one.
That's only the sad part for somebody that composes chess problems, where you only want to have one solution. All right, chat. So you have two chances to get this right, and then also you have to choose the one that Susan chose.
It's a savage move that I would have never played in a million years, if that's a hint for anybody.
Sorry, not. I have a3 in there. So black's last move was bishop to d7. Now it's white's turn.
Yeah.
And not rook takes d7, although that might be good too. But
no, rook takes d7, queen h4. It's still
right.
Still,
yeah. You don't really want to let the queen come in with any sort of checks, and you never know like if your king is going to be safe or not. You don't even want to take the risk. I don't think. I'll give him another few seconds here. It's not easy.
It's tough, but it's vicious. It's a vicious move.
Based on Omar's hint, queen takes b8. Very good, Dark Square Knight. You got
very well done. Yeah, that's it.
I'll leave it to you, Susan, if you want to show it.
Okay, so my favorite move was queen b8. Sacrificing my queen took on b8. And now comes a very unexpected part, because usually when we sacrifice a queen, it's usually check, check, checkmate kind of thing. But here it's a quiet move, knight e4. And my opponent was in big time pressure already at this point, and he was just stunned that even though it's his move, he doesn't have a check even to give and cannot stop the upcoming checkmate with my knight on f6.
So cold.
Yeah,
it's so cold.
What I love about it is that it's an attack that uses all your pieces. Like every piece got invested in using the attack in some way, and very Morphy-esque and very instructional as well.
This is wow.
Did you guys see that? I'll show it again. An instant replay. This position, probably the least expected move is queen taking the knight. Yeah, and there's it doesn't look like there's any sort of back rank, but you had to notice, of course, the weakness on f6 and that your knight is coming in next. I'm so not worthy. Chat is enjoying this, Susan, so as well as I am.
And just again, 3 brilliant moves. So if you all look at the game, it's I want to say it's move 17, moved 20 and 23 or something like that. It's three brilliants in a single game, and she knew they were brilliant every single time. Which we always talk about on Twitter. It's like, when you made that brilliant, did you know it was brilliant? And the answer is always no. For us, we know after the fact. That was just, it's one of the best games I've had the chance to look at. That's just the fact that you were 16 doing this is just, it's mind boggling. Just wow.
Yeah, it's always fun to win a game of chess, but to win in this style is special. Obviously, it doesn't happen
Yeah.
all that often.
Yeah, and by
Well,
the
you're
way,
pulling this from memory as you're walking us
well,
through.
how could you forget
Yeah.
if you played this
Yeah,
game?
exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, it might be worthwhile just to show the other mate as well. It's a similar idea.
Yeah, the other one would be to play knight e4, and I was debating a little bit which one to do. Same idea, knight f6, and here queen takes rook. And then queen takes knight, check, bishop e8.
This is fun too.
And here, this is also pretty fancy. Another queen sacrifice, although there is only one solution, by the way. Knight f6 would be a big blunder.
You think you're mating, and then all of a sudden you're
queen takes, unexpectedly we're in check and losing all of a sudden. So it would not work because we cannot take queen takes bishop while we're in check. So therefore, another queen sacrifice is needed. Queen e8, deflecting the queen from the f6 square, and
That's cool too.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of debate for me which one to choose, but it's a nice dilemma to have.
Pleasant choice.
Yeah, how would you like to die? Basically, is what she said.
Yeah, very nice.
Man. That's just ice
So I
cold.
have about another 10 minutes. So
Okay.
any
Well,
questions?
Yeah, I have a few that on a kind of a variety of different subjects. So I guess actually, Omar, you want to go ahead with your question? I know you had one that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, there was one that I was looking, but you know what? I want to make sure the chat gets a chance.
Okay.
Let's go with some of theirs.
We collected some from Twitter, so I can start with one of those at least.
Okay.
And I guess this is a subject, of course, that's near and dear to you, I'm sure, Susan, just from reading your posts. So Joe on Twitter said, can you speak on the topic of how to get more girls and women to play chess? What are the challenges? And what can us guys do to help?
Well, obviously that's one of the most often asked questions I get. And there are two parallels, I would say. One is that we need to widen the number of players, girls playing chess, and that's what my foundation primarily focuses on, giving opportunities for girls. And the second one is obviously the girls that are really talented and serious and want to succeed, give them the opportunity equal to what the boys and the men get, and try for them to become as good as they can possibly be, including without any limitations, potentially a grandmaster or world champion. So what are the reasons why there are so few girls? So there are multiple reasons, and a lot of it is cultural, I would say. That in general, like when I was growing up, girls weren't encouraged to play chess at all. Like even within my family, some family members thought, what kind of thing is it for a girl at age 4 or 5 to play chess? Girls should be playing with dolls. Girls should be dancing. Girls should be doing girly things. So that's for one. Obviously, that improved over the past 5 decades, but it's still here to some degree in some countries more than others. The second problem is that even the girls that get into chess, whether within their family, within the school, within chess tournaments, and I personally experienced a lot of that, especially as a young girl, as a teenager, but to some degree even later, that chess clubs and chess tournaments were very unfriendly for girls and women. I remember when I was a little girl, I was all the time told, what are you doing here? Chess is not for girls. They didn't want to play with me the first place, the guys that were at the chess club. In many tournaments, I wasn't allowed to play because of my gender, including when I was already playing in the Hungarian Championship final and qualified to the next stage of the World Championship. And I was not allowed to compete, even though I qualified by reaching one of the top three spots. So how can the guys help make the experience for the girls and the women who would join a chess club more enjoyable than I had to endure? Because many times, as I said, I had very degrading comments, sexist comments, unwanted advances. I think that's what the guys can help with today. And to say it's true, it improved a great deal since the 70s and the 80s when I dealt with most of this. But still, we have a long way to go to get an environment that would be welcoming to women. And that's one of the main reasons why most of the girls by age 11, 12, when they getting developed as young women, they just have too much of that nastiness and sexism that they don't want to deal with it. They are not deep enough into chess to say that it's worth it, and it's easier to leave. So I think that's kind of the main thing. The ambiance, they shouldn't feel uncomfortable in a chess club or at a chess tournament.
Great. And just so in case anybody's curious of finding more information about your foundation, I'll put the link in the chat so you can follow Susan on all of her social media and also um, check out all the things that you're doing with your foundation. I think that's all
Thank
very
you.
well said, beloved bookkeeper. That's exactly right. And so Omar and I will try to at least we'll keep doing our bit. I think
Yeah.
to keep the fight going
Yeah,
to help.
it's
But
yeah,
yeah,
it comes from each one of the club club members, right? And if each of you can educate a few students, that's how the whole culture can change.
okay. Any other questions from chat? Is it that you have? I mean, we had one question. Your favorite openings.
Well, first of all, I'd like to stress how unimportant openings are pretty much until you get to a professional level. That's kind of the most important answer here, I think.
Mm.
As for my personal preference, it kind of varied by different phases of my career. At one point, I used to love the Sicilian Dragon. At another phase, the King's Indian. Uh, I love the Colle. I actually have a video as well that is one of my best works, I think,
I had
in the
a friend in
video.
college who messaged me today when he saw that you were coming on. He said, "I have her Kali Zukertort video DVD still."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Shout
It's
out to you,
not so
Zach.
new anymore, but yeah, I think it's still good work. Yeah, but the overall openings are not terribly important for most people unless you're a professional player.
I love how you put it in Twitter when you mentioned that earlier today. You were like, if you were to play a grandmaster and they play what I think you said A3 or H3 to start, could you beat them? And I was like, no. So there's no way you could. So they could even open with that, and it wouldn't matter. And that was very
Exactly.
eye opening for me. As much time as I've spent looking at different openings, thinking, particularly very early on, a couple of years ago when the Queen's Gambit was uh started the boom, and it was like, oh, there's a silver bullet. I'll get this opening class, and that'll be the thing I need. And then to hear you say that, I'm like, that is so very true. It's
It's
just
about,
focus on
at a
tactics.
big,
Yeah.
yeah, at a beginner intermediate level, it's all about tactics, tactics, tactics. It's whoever is able to spot more consistently his or her own tactics or avoid the opponent's tricks. That's the one who wins.
Question from Tom Casper in the chat. This is a good one. I like this one. Do you still play any of your family members when you
Oh, that's a good
get
question.
together? Over the holidays or when you're visiting. Do you ever just like sit down and play a couple hours of Blitz or something like that?
Actually, no. I think if I think back, the last time I played either of my sisters, it had to be somewhere in the mid 90s, early mid 90s.
Wow.
Been a while. Okay. Omar,
That's
you go
funny.
for it because I think your question is really relevant to it. I think a lot of people would
Uh,
share your question as well.
So Susan, the question I had was about really it's about the process. One of the things that I struggle with is process and really not focusing really outcome goals and saying, all right, the I want to get to here. I want to get to this place and get to this level. And unfortunately or fortunately, that requires losing and losing often and failing fast and getting all the lessons. And intellectually, that makes sense. That tracks. When I'm not sitting over a board, losing to someone, this is advice I would give. It is difficult to receive, particularly after a loss. And in some of my tournament losses, Ian has jumped on Zoom with me and it's like, it's okay. You're gonna be fine. Just move on to the next game. And I'm pretending that it's okay, but inside I'm dying, and it's just something that it repeatedly comes up. I was talking to Amy about this earlier today, about just the struggle of even playing sparring games against friends, and psychologically what it does to you. And I typically will tilt because I'm the very thing that makes me, want to pursue and go after it is also the thing that I have to overcome in terms of being very intense, about it. And that makes me go after it. How do you had to have lost early on
Oh, I
to
lost
develop
plenty
your
of
will.
games.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How did you manage that emotionally to particularly dealing with everything else that you were dealing with as well? So losses had to be doubly hard for you because of everything else that you were managing. How did you do it?
Uh, well, there is no easy way. Obviously, everybody has to go through the pain. No pain, no gain, right?
Right.
But ultimately, I would say if you want to avoid losing too much, it's important to work on our game. Because if you keep just, so let's say if you have X amount of time, let's say you have an hour a day, right, to devote to chess. And if all you do is play and then make mistakes and lose, it can be discouraging. So I think it's really important to make little goals and games within the game. And the beauty today is that, for example, there are so many amazing practicing opportunities online for completely free. You can go on Lichess or other sites as well, where you can do, for example, puzzle race or puzzle rush or all kind of things like that. And obviously, it's different than playing a game, but it's still competitive. And if you can conquer that, and in there you can measure directly improvement. Let's say the first try you get 5 right, or then you get 8 and 12, and that will help your actual game. Because as I mentioned earlier, at the kind of beginner intermediate level, the tactics is everything. So
Mm,
I think I would probably play less actual games and do work on my game, especially tactics, that will help you lose less and win more. But as of overcoming the emotional part of it, you just have to put it in perspective, right? You're not a professional player. So yes, you'll make mistakes, you'll lose some games, but unless you're actually making steps to improve your games, your tactics, or eventually maybe some basic openings, that to avoid falling into some opening traps, that's the only way to improve.
That was a
that's a
great
great
question.
Because
thank
Yeah.
you.
yeah, up to a certain level, the tactics just overwhelm everything else.
Susan, I
Thank
know
you,
you have
Susan.
to
That
go,
yeah.
but can I just sneak in one more question, a personal one for
Yes,
me?
sure.
Uh, I know that you have kids, grown kids now, but you clearly had to balance at some point being like a professional chess coach and also chess parent at the same time. I have two young kids. My oldest is 5, and he's just starting to do some chess classes now, and he's interested. He doesn't let me coach him, but he likes chess, and so I guess for any chess parents out there, and for me, um, how did you balance those two roles? And uh, any tips that you might have for making sure that you foster the love of the game with them would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I think I was successfully passing on the passion for the game to my kids. They both played as youngsters. My older one actually was pretty good and pretty talented. He won several national scholastic championships in like early, I think, second grade, third grade, around then. Eventually, he became a master and went on to have other career, gave up playing chess, never became a professional. But I have to say that just like most of us have the challenge of teaching our own children, and I asked other friends rather to teach them mostly. Uh, First of all, because I was very busy, but also because I think it's easier to teach when it's not your own child.
Oh, good. Now I don't feel so guilty
Although
about not having worked so much with them yet.
yeah, I mean there are obviously exceptions, but generally it's easier to teach somebody else's kid because also it's not nothing to do with chess, by the way. I remember so many occasions then I was telling something to my kids 100 times and they kept arguing, rolling their eyes, and all of a sudden a stranger, somebody else tells them the same thing. They go, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was funny. Well, he came back from like his first class, and he said, hey dad, did you know that in the opening you're supposed to develop your pieces and castle?" And I was like, "Yes, Steady, good job."
I
I,
mentioned 100 times before.
I did know that one. Okay,
Oh man.
Susan, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really
Yeah.
fun, and we really
Okay, my
appreciate
pleasure.
you finding the time. I know that you're like in between trips and fitting us
Yeah.
in, so
Yeah.
we it was an absolute pleasure, and really
Absolute
grateful that
pleasure.
you came
Yeah.
on. So
My
So
pleasure, and keep having fun, guys. That's what's most
we'll
important.
do. We'll do. Thank you, Susan.
Bye
okay, that's
bye.
that's gonna
Take
be it
care.
for us, you guys. So we're gonna sign off now. Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.